Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is a fantastically chilling reminder of what lurks in the deep dark woods. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR? And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled Tree Devils. Let's get straight into that. When I was 8 years old, my great-grandmother died. She left behind a beautiful farmhouse in rural Delaware. After weeks of intense feuding between my parents and my aunt, my dad's sister, we inherited the homestead. It was a big change for us. My little brother, Zeke, and I had spent our whole life in an urban neighborhood up until then. We were quite excited because there were hundreds of acres of farmland and woods for me to explore. Everything was exactly the way one would expect rural living to be for a couple of years. My dad, who did grow up in the country, taught me how to shoot and hunt. I explored the nearby forest almost daily. One of my favourite spots was a lone oak tree in the middle of a farmer's field. It wasn't in a hedgerow. It was all alone out there. The nearest tree to it was at least 300 yards away. It was a surreal sight, like some sort of famous painting. And sometimes a lone dove would rest in the lone tree and coo a lonely song. My dad taught me how to coo back and elicit a response. Well, one evening, I was 10 years old then, and I was sitting at the edge of our yard and gazing at the tree. The sun was setting behind it. It was beautiful. As the last slivers of sunlight disappeared behind the distant woods, I noticed something. A branch at the very top of the lone tree seemed different. I had spent hours just staring at the mighty oak. I knew that tree like my own reflection, but something was different about it. A scraggly branch at the top seemed to take the form of a small, skinny person, or a person-like shape. It seemed to be perched atop of the oak tree like a sailor peering at the horizon in a photograph. I stared intently at the anomaly. I barely blinked my eyes, and they watered in the dry breeze. My eyes stayed fixed on the object until the sun disappeared and it was too dark to see it, and then my mother called me in. Over dinner, I mentioned it to my dad. He just told me I probably saw an owl or buzzard. I didn't think that was the case, but I didn't want to bother my dad anymore. He was a good man, but he had a short fuse, especially when he was eating. I couldn't get the strange object off of my mind, and I barely slept that night. In the morning, around 6, I noticed my mum was up. I figured it would be fine for me to wake up too, and so I groggily shuffled down the hall to say good morning. She smiled and returned the sentiment. I asked her if I could go outside and play. She didn't understand why I would want to go outside at that time in the morning, but she gave me permission anyway. I immediately made my way to the edge of our property to check on the tree. As the sun rose, it illuminated the oak in an orange glow. It was beautiful, as usual. I looked hard for the object atop of the tree, but after an intense search, I concluded it was gone. I didn't really know what to make of it at the time, but I was sure something was amiss. Months went by and the bitter winter came. It was an especially cold winter with lots of snow. My dad took the opportunity to introduce us to another perk of country life. He fired up his four-wheel drive Ford pickup and took the family driving in the deep snow. It was exciting. We were the very first to make tracks on our dirt road. I liked the way we swerved and swayed while the tires searched for traction. I remember Dwight Yoakam's Fast As You playing on the radio. I was all bundled up and I could see my breath. Dad's pickup didn't have a working heater. And suddenly, my dad lost traction, and before I even knew what was happening, we found ourselves at the bottom of a ditch that hugged the forest. My dad made sure that everyone was okay. As my parents deliberated on strategy to escape the ditch, I looked out my window. I couldn't see much, just snow, but I thought it was pretty. I liked how the brake lights reflected off the pure white blanket. It was comforting, like a campfire. And then my zen moment was interrupted by a loud thud on the roof of the truck. Everyone in the cab jumped. As my parents, now stressed out, bickered with each other, I continued to study the snow. I noticed that something was on the ground outside. It must have fallen from the trees above. It was hard to say what it was, as it was mostly covered by the snow. I knew it wasn't there before the thump. It was green and sort of shiny. I tried to get my dad's attention, but he ignored me. After a couple of minutes, my dad decided to walk up the road to elicit the help of a neighbour, our only neighbour. My mum comforted my little brother. He was nervous and a little scared. Me, though, I was curious. I was completely content staring hard at the fallen object. And then my mum demanded my attention. "John?" She beckoned me. I ignored her. "John!" She demanded my attention. "What?" I snapped back as I turned my attention to her. She warned me not to get snippy. She only wanted to make sure that I was all right. I assured her that I was and redirected my attention to the fallen object. It was gone. "Mum, the thing. That thing that fell, I tried to organise my words despite my excitement. She tried to hear me out, but I must have been completely incoherent. As I tried to explain, another thud made us jump again. This time it was coming from the back of the pickup. We hadn't even noticed our neighbour's Jeep back up behind us and my dad hooking up a tow straps to our truck. My dad had to get us all out while we pulled it back onto the road. I didn't bother to mention the incident to my family again that night. And they were too excited about our exciting adventure in the snow to listen. My distracted 10-year-old mind soon forgot about the thing outside the truck in the excitement of Christmas. One of the perks of Christmas was that I got to see family that I didn't get to see often. I was especially excited to see my grandmother. She liked to spoil us with gifts and candy, and she was a character. I spent hours just listening to her complain about Bill Clinton and yell at my dad for his dipping habit. I didn't care what she was talking about, I just liked to hear from her. As the evening went on, my brother and I decided to go outside and play with our cousins. After a snowball fight and an ambitious snow fort build-off, nature was calling. I excused myself so I could head inside to the bathroom. I took off my soggy shoes at the door to avoid the wrath of my grandmother. As I crossed through the kitchen, on my way to the bathroom, I noticed the adults talking in the adjacent living room. They hadn't noticed my presence, and I decided to eavesdrop. I didn't catch every word, but I got the gist of it. My grandmother was going on about my great-grandmother's husband. His name was Charlie, and she was blaming some sort of creatures for his death, and she referred to them as tree devils. I always knew he had died somewhere on the farm near our house, but Dad told me it was a machine malfunction. He had got entangled in the turbine of a harvester. My dad tried to convince her that she was losing it in the old age. After all, she did claim to have seen a UFO in the 60s. She was adamant in her convictions. She swore up and down that the tree devils were real. She talked about them dancing in the trees. She claimed that they were the reason she moved to the city. She used to live next door to our house when my great-grandmother lived there. And just as the story was getting interesting, I was spotted by Mum. I explained that I was on my way to the restroom, and I moved on. All I could think about after that was tree devils. For weeks, I swore I was seeing them at the top of every tree. It was all in my mind, of course. I just desperately wanted to see one. Over time, my obsession subsided, and it was business as usual. I had all but forgotten about my grandmother's story and the weird things I had seen. That is until one night, several months later. One summer night, I found sleep quickly with the assistance of the ambient sounds of crickets and cicadas outside. I was sharing a room with my younger brother, because the water heater in my room sprung a leak. It was an old house with lots of problems. After a couple of hours of rest, I was awoken by a thud on the hardwood floor. I sat up in bed to find Zeke stumbling to his feet underneath an open window. "Oh, what in the world are you doing?" I inquired. "There was a jumpy thing," is all he said in a monotone voice. Now, I was curious. I pressured him for more information, and he described a short, black, skinny creature that jumped around like a kangaroo. He claimed that it had big ears and backward legs like a bird. He claimed that it ran and jumped back into the window when it started hopping towards him and then hit me. "Why did you go outside?" I interrogated the 6-year-old boy. "I wanted to play." It turns out that it had been tapping on the window, and when the tapping woke him up, he said it smiled at him, a toothy grin, and held up a soccer ball that he had left in the yard. It then playfully hopped off, but after he snuck out, it got too close and scared Zeke. We decided to sleep in the same bed that night, and I kept a Swiss Army knife under the pillow and a baseball bat next to the bed. In fact, we maintained that sleeping arrangement for a few weeks afterwards. Eventually, things went back to normal. Years passed and my brother chalked it up to sleepwalking or something similar. I hadn't seen anything odd in a while, so I accepted his explanation. However, we were still cautious about being outside at night. And whenever we went to explore the woods, we wielded a .22 caliber rifles. It was the sort of place where it was normal for kids to have guns. We had gotten older and stopped caring about monsters in the trees. We developed new interests like every teenager does. At the very last year I lived in that house, tree devils and jumping things couldn't have been further from my mind. I knew I'd miss it. One August evening, I sat cross-legged at the edge of our lot to watch the sun set over the old oak tree. I was deep in thought about all the good times I had there and how much I'd miss it. I was leaving for Paris Island the next day, and my parents were selling the place. My brother came walking up behind me. "Beer?" he offered. I graciously accepted it. I lit up a Marlboro Red before cracking open a beer he had no doubt stolen from Dad. I passed him a smoke and he did the same. We didn't say much, we just watched the sun set over the tree. It was the last time we would ever be able to do so together, and wouldn't you know it, there they were. One by one, little spindly creatures with pointy ears and backward legs silhouetted themselves atop of the tree, but this time they weren't still like statues and none of them hopped towards Zeke. They danced in the tree the way you would expect demons to dance in hell, and they circled each other and hopped up and down. My brother and I gave each other a look of acknowledgement. We didn't say a word, we just watched the little monsters dance until it was too dark to see them. I stood up and tossed my empty beer can into the field. My brother and I headed into the house. I bid farewell to my family and my childhood home. I was going to spend my final night with my high school sweetheart, who is now my wife. As I drove my pickup down the old dirt road for the very last time, I looked in my rearview mirror, and I swear to you, in the middle of the road stood around a dozen or so of the little monsters, watching me leave. I don't know what those things were or if they are still around. I don't know if they were dangerous or if they really killed my great-grandfather. I do know, however, my grandmother was telling the truth about them dancing in the trees. It took me 10 years to witness it, and I'll never get to see it again. But it's true. Wow. Another one. Wow. Absolutely awesome stuff. What a wonderful little short story there. By the incredibly talented StnkyCaveApe. Great author's name as well. Really like that one. Guys and girls, as ever, a huge thank you for your patience this week. Getting the episodes up to you guys has been a bit of a struggle this week. as it is most weeks with the 3 kids at home. Lockdown business has been an extra test. Keep the channel content coming. It's been quite difficult to find a half hour or an hour that we can keep the house quiet enough and Daddy quickly get his work done. But of course, as ever, please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. I hope family and friends are all well. I hope you're finally returning back to normal life. I understand that a lot of you aren't. Thoughts and prayers are with you all, of course. And above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.